So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone who has joined this session, depending on from which place in the world you have joined this. If you are looking for data cleansing in Salesforce and Salsa and why it matters, you are at the right place. Let's wait for one more minute and then we will start. So again, welcome all who have just joined. So if you are looking for data cleansing in Salesforce and Salsa and why it matters, you're at the right place. Uh, I am Neeraj Garg and I am the Chief Operating Officer at Aplusify. We lead a team of around 300 professionals who help our global clients to manage different integrations with Salesforce and provide other Salesforce services like data cleansing. So, and I have with me Rachel Slattery from Salsa. She is actually the partner manager with Salsa and has been instrumental in Salsa's growth over the last 7 and 8 years. So welcome, Rachel, to this webinar. And she will provide valuable inputs on why data cleansing is important before we do Salsa and Salesforce integration, and what are the key things that we have to do. So I think let's get started. So we will just start with the Salsa and Salesforce integration stuff, where Rachel will talk about Salsa and Salesforce and the various Salsa Engage features and why integration is important. So over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Neeraj. Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Slattery, as Neeraj said, the partner manager here at Salsa. And in case anyone's unfamiliar, maybe you're new here, just to set the stage, the SalsaLabs platform, we do have an integration with Salesforce, and that integration is through our Salsa Engage platform. So Salsa Engage is your online communication, online fundraising, and online advocacy platform. And that's meant to be paired with some sort of database. And a lot of times nonprofits are using Salesforce. And so what's great is you can have your Salesforce database as your database of record, and you're using Engage to kind of sit on top of that, run your online communications and online fundraising through Salsa Engage, and Engage is passing information down into Salesforce. And Salesforce would be where you run all your reports, and it's incorporating that offline data and the online data from Salsa Engage. And so on this screen here, what's really cool about the Engage and Salesforce integration is that it's bi-directional. So that means that information from Salesforce is pushing into Engage and the vice versa. So Engage will push information down into Salesforce. So that Engage sync allows supporters, both new and pre-existing, to send the data back and forth. And there are a few data points that we send back and forth. Some are only one way. So for example, the online activities that we're sending from Salsa Engage, that would be like ticket sales, advocacy, petitions, fundraising. Those will push down into campaigns within Salesforce. Online donations will show up as opportunities down in Salesforce. Supporters and contacts. So the supporters are in Engage. They're named contacts in Salesforce. So sometimes there's different titles for different fields, but it's the same thing. That's bi-directional. So information that's updated in one platform will update the other. Any offline donations that you have captured in Salesforce can be pushed to offline donations within Salsa Engage, and your groups too. So if you have offline campaigns, so people in groups in Salesforce, you can push those to groups in Salsa Engage and email those people and do kind of your online solicitation through the Engage platform. And so that's kind of how the bi-directional sync works in regards to what we're syncing. And then on the Salesforce side, we have the ability to turn on that sync so that updates are made to the contacts and other mapped data, which you fully control within the Salesforce, or I'm sorry, within the Engage interface. So you map the fields saying which data fields should go to here and which data fields go here within Salesforce. And you can also control the timing of those syncs too. So how frequent you want those syncs to run. So that kind of sets the stage for what the big picture is and why we're doing it, to keep data consistent. But before we do any of that, we need to make sure that our data is good to start out with. And that's the topic of today. So I'll go ahead and pass it back to Neeraj.
Thanks, Rachel. So before we start, I just want to launch a poll question just to understand from everyone on what is your opinion about doing a data health check before integration. How many do you think is data health check important before doing any kind of integration? Let's give everyone a minute to do that. Okay, that's encouraging. I think 100% people think that data health check is necessary before integration. We have 88% people who think that it is important. 13% say maybe. Okay, so I think that sets a good scene for what we have in our next few slides. Now, before we move to what we need to do in data health check, what I wanted to tell you is, why do we actually need a data health check before we integrate Salsa with Salesforce or Salesforce with Salsa? So let's take an example. Imagine, see, any integration that we do involves exchange of data between the two systems. So when we integrate, like Rachel was telling, when we do Salesforce Salsa integration, the Salesforce contacts will flow to Salsa, and then Salsa records will flow back to Salesforce. So there is an exchange of records, which means the data will be migrated. Now imagine a scenario where there are around 100,000 records in Salesforce that need to be migrated to Salsa. Okay, so this is just a figure to give you a heads up on, it can be more or less, right? So imagine a scenario where there are 100K records which need to be migrated. Now, out of those, there are around 40,000 records in Salesforce which does not have an email address. Okay, so around 40% records are there in contacts which do not have an email address. Now, since we are doing an integration and we don't know how to do a data health check, your consultant or your development team initializes the integration without doing a data health check. So we start the migration process, and what happens is then that once you do this 100K records migration from Salesforce to Salsa, all these 40,000 records with missing email address get migrated from your Salesforce system to Salsa as well. Okay. Now, once they get migrated, now you have 40,000 records in Salesforce that didn't have an email address. Now you have transported the same problem to Salsa as well. So you have 40,000 records in Salesforce which are bad. Now you have 40,000 records more in Salsa, right, which are actually missing email address. So you have doubled your problems. You have created more records where things are bad. So if you would have done a data health check before migrating the system, you would have identified that these are the 40,000 records that are missing email address. And the best part would have been to update the email address in these 40,000 records before doing any kind of migration. What would that have done is corrected your existing email addresses in Salesforce, and then you wouldn't have transported that same problem to Salsa, which means lesser issues after migration, right? Most of the times, once we have done integration or we have provided support services to our clients, we have found out that there are missing data in the system. And that is because we are not doing a data health check before starting any kind of integration. This is a very simple example to show you the volume of the problem that you can experience if you start doing a migration without doing a data health check. Now, what are the data health check parameters, right? What would we see in a data health check? So I think first and foremost is about data visualization, because you need to understand the source and the target systems. Okay, there may be the database issue, like you can see, people don't know from which database the records are correct, right? Which is the correct database to import to. So it's always good to understand that problem, talk to the stakeholders to understand what is the source database, where are the records that are correct, right? And then there may be records which you may not require. There may be legacy records of the last 15 to 20 years about your members, which maybe your business does not want to migrate to the new system. So it's always good to have a sessions with your stakeholders to understand what they actually need from the new system. Okay, so always get a sign off from the stakeholders and ask which database should we choose to actually migrate the data, right? So it's always good to talk to these stakeholders, translate, which means write down all the requirements in terms of what data need to be migrated, what does not need to be migrated, right? In a clear document, and get a sign off from them, right? Because as an example, there are maybe 1 million records of last 15 years, which the business does not want to migrate to the new system. But since you have not talked to the stakeholders and just taken that dump and migrated to the new system, you have increased the effort, time, and cost, and wasted unnecessary energy to transport unnecessary data from one system to another, because we have not talked to the stakeholders who are the actual owners of the data. So first and foremost step is to talk to the stakeholders, all the stakeholders. It can be the finance team, it can be your marketing team, it can be your sales team, it can be your accounting team. So get everything understood from them before migrating anything from one system to another. So get all these stakeholders in one room, take a sign off, get the document prepared, and then start the process. That would actually help your business users also to get involved in the migration process. If you don't involve them, I think they will just wait for the system to be migrated and then come up with n number of issues. So, Rachel, what is your take on this data visualization stuff? Do you think it's important?
Yeah, absolutely. There were so many good things that you said in there too, and a lot of it actually was pulling on the previous topic that we did last month. Maybe some of you attended that too, but it's so good to involve people within your organization, even if they don't have a direct job responsibility with the data, but they're impacted by that data and their jobs rely on that data, especially development directors, executive directors, the IT people. And so it's good for everyone to kind of get an understanding of, you might not, be doing the actual migration or the implementation, but your work is going to be impacted by that. And so to kind of have those conversations about, here's the data that we have, what do we want to bring over, what makes sense for us to have, and getting everyone's input, I think will actually make the process a lot smoother and the end result a lot better, more meaningful, because people have been involved. They also will get an appreciation for all of the work that the implementation and the conversion team is doing. So those stakeholders that you have on your team that are looking at the data and kind of understanding what you have and what you want to pull over, and getting that input from all the teams. So I think that understanding that just across the board, it can't be understated. It's so important to get, like you said, everyone involved, get everyone's input, because at the end of the day, everyone's using that. They're going to be using a new platform. They need to understand why things were left out or why things were included, and then everyone's on the same page. And if there are any disagreements, or if there are any questions, you can work that out during the process and not afterwards when everything is supposed to be zipped up and finished. And that's bound to happen sometimes, and it does. It's just sort of natural. But a lot of those big issues you can work out in the beginning stages when you're just getting started with these implementation processes and the data cleanups.
Yeah, that's true. So I think once we have done this kind of exercise with the business, it's important to understand the current data that we have in either the source system or the target system. So source system is something from where you are migrating, and target system is where you are migrating. So we have just taken examples to make things clear, right? So a typical database where the data is stored for your users looks like this, right? So they may have fields like first name, email, date of birth, country, right, and other parameters. Now, if you see in this table, right, in the email, there are two emails with the same email ID, samuel@329@example.com. Now, if you do a data health check on your system, you may realize that these are two duplicate rows of the same person, right? So, and this is just one example. You may have many duplicates like this in your source system and in your target system, right? So it's important that you identify the duplicates in both these systems, because if this kind of data gets migrated to the target system, the same problem will occur there. And then what will happen is, when you pull out reports, your users will complain that we have got duplicate rows. And that is a very common complaint that we get. So the reason for that was because we didn't do this kind of duplicate check and remove duplicate records before migration. So a very similar example, right? So before doing any stuff, one of the parameters for data health check is drop duplicates. So identify all the duplicates in both the source system and the target systems and get rid of them. There is a lot of inconsistent data also. If you can see the date of the birth column here, right? Now, all the date of birth is in DD, MMYOY format. But if you see this blue highlighted row, this says 12 September 1984. Now you can see the format of this date of birth is very, very different from the other format, which makes it inconsistent, because when you migrate it, you will have same inconsistent data transported to a different system, which will make that data inconsistent, right? So try to identify inconsistent data in your systems. Inconsistent data means data which is not consistent with the format that we are using for different columns in our database, right? So this is just an example, just to highlight that. And we find so many records like these in our client systems. So this is very, very common, right? So first was identify duplicates, drop them. And second is identify inconsistent data, because all this data is bad data, which will actually create n number of issues in your system if you migrate it. Now you remove invalid data. Now what is invalid data? Invalid data, if you see the country column, we have row for mark, which is marked in green here. It says 24. Now 24 is not a country, right? Everyone knows that. So this data is invalid, right? And you may have other invalid values like this, right? So it's always good to get the invalid data removed from your system. Now, missing data is the major problem, where a lot of things, mandatory fields are missing, right? So maybe your date of birth is missing, or your membership renewal dates are missing. Here, if you can see, we have for Samuel, the date of birth is missing. And then for another row, which is actually a duplicate row, the country is missing. So these are all, we have to find all these missing records, especially records which are mandatory to fill, like date of birth, country, email, first name, last name, right? Try to identify all the mandatory fields that are required to pull out reports, and identify that no data is missing out of it, right? So get a report, find those missing data, talk to your business, right? Give them a report on these are the missing data in the system. What do we need to do? Because the technical team does not know what data needs to be filled in here. They will need to get that kind of data from the business team because they are the data owners. They only know what data is to be populated in all these missing data. And that is why my first slide about data visualization, right? Where you need to get that kind of interaction with these stakeholders, get them involved in the data migration process, because these are the things that you need to get back to them before actually starting the migration process, because this is all pre-migration process. You are actually trying to clean the data in both these systems. And for that also, you need help from the business team. You cannot do it yourself, right? Because the data owners are the actual business users and they are going to help it out. It may take maybe a couple of months, maybe 3 months to clean that activity, but I think worth the time to spend that kind of time to do a data cleansing before migration. Otherwise, you can understand from the examples what these are just one rows, right? There may be millions of rows or hundreds of thousands of rows, depending on the number of members you have in your system, all across. Now, when we talk about all these stuff, right? How do we actually get to understand this missing data or inconsistent data or invalid data or duplicate data, right? What is the best way to do it? And I think the best way to do it is by creating dashboards for data cleansing. It may sound new to many people, but data cleansing dashboard is something that should be a constant activity for you. Because if you can see in this dashboard, right, we have got contacts with national membership out here on the left, and then we have got this kind of bifurcation on the right side where you identify who are active members, who are cancelled, who are expired, who are pending. Now, if you click on this button in your dashboard, you will get different kinds of drill down reports to understand whether your data that is there for membership is accurate or not, right? But these dashboards are important because your business does not have time to study Excel reports, right? They will need something in your system, a dashboard kind of stuff where they can actually go and click and understand what is missing and what is not missing. And I think this is also important because even if you clean the data, you will need these dashboards to understand what is the progress on data cleansing. How will your business identify what is the progress? So maybe there were 40,000 records which had missing data. Now you corrected 40,000, right? Now, when you again generate this kind of dashboard, it should say that all the records have been corrected, or your business should know that all these kind of reports. So it's important to have this data cleansing dashboard in your system as a constant activity, even after you migrated, because once you have migrated, also you will need the data to be clean in both these systems. So if you see in this data cleansing dashboard, we have all contacts with missing all addresses, right? We have contacts with missing work addresses, missing home addresses, right? 45,000 records, 3,000 records. So all these addresses, all these missing data, how you get it, right? And then it bifurcates on basis of what are the missing addresses based on the status value of members. So this kind of reports and dashboards are important for your stakeholders to understand because they are business people. They don't have access to your databases. They will only have access to your system where they can see these kind of dashboards and drill down and see what data is missing. So it's very important to create these data cleansing dashboards to understand invalid data. Now here, contacts with no personal email addresses, contacts with no work email, contacts with no email addresses. And these are actual data cleansing dashboards that we have built for our clients because it actually continuously shows the performance of your bad data, right? Whether we are actually progressing on and this is a data cleansing is a regular audit activity that should happen maybe after every month or after every quarter to understand where we are. Because there are multiple sources of adding bad data into the system. People can enter wrong email addresses. People can miss data to be filled in, right? And if there are not sufficient checks in your system, all this data is going to expand and become a swamp kind of stuff where if it increases, it will take more time to get out of it, right? So it's always good to take these kind of preventive measures, understand, cleans the data, and then I would not say do 100% cleaning, but as much as you can, it would actually help in your migration process. So, Rachel, do you think these kind of data cleansing dashboards are actually necessary for everyone or the management to see before we start the migration process?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it'll set the stage too, so you can see the state of your data, and everyone's always looking at, oh, look how many new supporters we got and how many new donations and all those good metrics. But I think it's really helpful, if not more helpful, to see where there are holes in the data, and putting it visually like this helps me, and I know it would help other people too, just to kind of get their heads around, what is the percentage of people that we don't have even email addresses for. And obviously you would want these graphs, to get lower and lower and lower, and it'll set expectations too. And those can be part of the goals that you build into your quarterly process or your annual process, working to get as much data and full profiles on your supporters as possible, because it'll help with the integrity of the data, but it'll also help your organization communicate better to your supporters. When you have that accurate information, especially if you're using merge fields like within email. So you've got the email itself, you've got the email address, but you want to make it personal. So you put hello, and then you want to merge in first name. Well, what if you don't have first name for over 50% of your people? And you can go and read the stats about if personalized emails get opened more, or if you have their name in the subject line, what that does for your open rates and click-through rates. But all of that matters, and it's coming from the data in your database. And so a really good way to get a handle on how to improve that is to create these dashboards with Aplusify, and then you can work towards those goals. And the trickle-down effect is that your organization will be performing better, your supporters will be interacting with you more, because you've got that accurate data on them, and you can address them properly, you can segment them properly, target them properly. And then so you can start to see how that all, again, is the trickle-down effect of having good data. And that starts with understanding where you're at and consistently checking where you're at too. So like Neeraj said, making this as part of a quarterly look that you do, or monthly, whatever it is, just so you can continue to maybe look at your trend lines, see where you're going, maybe after a big campaign or a big online push and you've had an influx of data come through, check to see what that's like, just so you can get an idea of where you stand and where you want to be. So I would definitely agree that everybody needs to be doing something like this. And if you're not, hopefully you've learned something new here and you can implement it.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think obviously this data cleansing activity is something that should be a regular process that you should be doing, rather than doing it maybe once in a year or once you're doing the migration. It should be a proper activity of someone who is supporting you and providing these kind of dashboards, and there should be an audit team from your end who can actually check what is the percentage of bad data in their system, because bad data should not accumulate in your system, because if it accumulates, I think it's just occupying unnecessary space in the system and causing a number of issues, which is going to cost you money. So obviously this is an activity which should happen every quarter, at least from your team. And I think this is important. So we have covered that we need to visualize the data. We have understood what is data health check, what are the different parameters that you should be taking care of, why you should be taking care of. And I think I give it to Rachel to maybe sum it up and give her recommendations on what is actually important before starting Salsa and Salesforce integration?
Sure. So the first bullet on the list here is to get sign off from the business. And that's going back to what we said at the very beginning, which is get everybody involved, because everybody is impacted by this, whether they're the ones sending the emails, they're the ones soliciting donations. Accurate information and as much information as you can get is imperative to make these campaigns successful, not just short term, but long term too. Do data cleansing on both source and target systems. So the system that you're coming off of and the system that you're going into, and that's an ongoing project. I would really recommend that people take an active effort to look at this stuff. If you're using bad data and you're sending out emails, you're really not doing any good, right? If you've got email addresses that are old and they're bouncing back, and you've got no one's first names, no one's date of births, if you're sending out happy birthdays in the month of their birthday or something like that, and it's all bad data, you're just kind of wasting your time in a way, because you're not using the actual data that is accurate. And making sure that field mapping is accurate too. So you shouldn't have, first name going to the last name column. That would obviously be a very bad mistake. And you want to double check that and make sure everything is good. And that kind of tags along with the last bullet point here, which is to get user acceptance testing done. Check to make sure that your data is right. You can do things in chunks. You can do tests first, which is something that we do. Take a little bit of the data, map it over, double check that everything is where it's supposed to be, where you expect it to be, in the format that you expect it to be. That is the time to work through those issues, not when you have your full database over with 100,000 records and you find out that some field got mixed up with another field. That's quite the headache. So I would definitely recommend that too. Just double checking, get other people involved too, because they might catch things that you might not catch. I know for myself, I'm looking at spreadsheets all day and my eyes start to go cross at the end of the day. And so getting somebody else to look at something might show you something that you didn't see before, or that you just missed because you're so heads down in it that it becomes easy to miss those big things. So those would be my recommendations. I will also make a note for any of our Salsa Engage users. You can very easily, in the supporters tab, there's a query tab there, and you can query on if fields are blank. So you can write a query for yourself that says, give me everyone whose first name is blank. And you can see how many of those records in Salsa Engage you have that have no first names. And of course, all that information is in Salesforce too. But that's a quick and easy way to just kind of get started, maybe get your feet wet a little bit with looking at that data that you're missing. The Engage platform makes it pretty easy to pull back that stuff. So that's what I would say. Anything you would add, Neeraj?
Yeah, I think that are, very good recommendations, Rachel. And just to add on that user acceptance testing point, I think based on our experience, what we have found out is that if you involve business users in doing that user acceptance testing, they feel to be a part of the migration, right? They understand what the process we are doing. They feel as a part of our team. They understand that we are giving them importance. And I think their initial feedback is very important, because they will come up with many things that we don't know. It may be that, as an example, we were doing a user acceptance testing and we came up with a certain issue about a certain records that were missing, right? And didn't have sufficient data. And after talking to the users, we found out that this is the kind of records that they're not using, and they have not used it for years. So it's important to understand these kind of problems from them and just so what we did was we just identified all that kind of legacy data from them, and it actually reduced our load by almost 25% for the migration of data. So I think if we involve these stakeholders in this user acceptance testing, it would not come as a surprise or a shock to them when we give the entire system to them for test, because they've already been engaged and they know what the process is and they would actually sign it off very easily at a later stage. So I think involving them is very crucial for the entire success. And this is the most crucial point, I think, that I would suggest. So I think that brings to the end of our session, where we have talked more about why data cleansing is important, how to do data cleansing, how to check it using data cleansing dashboards, and what are the different points that we should make. So if you think you have any kind of problems or you need any guidance, feel free to mail us at vcare@aplusify.com. We are actually helping a lot of our global customers resolve their issues and guide them into the different migration process, because migration is framework that needs to be designed and controlled, right? There are certain steps that need to be followed to make it successful. And if we don't follow those steps, I think we are bound to fail. So if you are looking for any kind of help, feel free to mail on this ID, or feel free to mail me and Rachel, and we can answer your queries. And obviously this recording and this presentation will be shared with you after this webinar. If you have any questions, you can post it in the question and answers list if you have. I think one of the questions that we have got is, how can we build these data cleansing dashboards in our system? I think these data cleansing dashboards, you can talk to your technical team if you have someone working for you. It's simple reports that you can pull in, like Rachel was telling in Salsa Engage, you have a query where you can just write a query for yourself and find out missing data. So I think there are different reports that your development team can pull in and put in these kind of dashboards for you to understand. And if you still think you have problems, you can always contact us. I don't think so we have any more questions. So I think let's wrap it up. Thank you so much, Rachel, for guiding us through this webinar. Your inputs have been very valuable, and thanks for your time. And we will see you in the next webinar when we have. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.